Welcome back to another Kirby on Sports exclusively on the Kirby on Sports podcast YouTube page. I believe for the first time, we have Dan Dempsky, our co-host and lead contributor, joining us for this interview. Dan, it's glad to see you once again for an exclusive interview. Welcome.
Well, thank you for the warm welcome. I'm happy to be here, man. It's kind of a bummer I missed out before, but I'm happy to catch this one. So
absolutely, I'm glad to have you, Dan. And our special guest today, this gentleman has a long resume. He is the host of Grant and Danny on 106.7 The Fan. He covers the Caps part-time for NBC Sports Washington. He was a former play-by-play guy for the AFL team, the Washington Valor. He covered play-by-play for the DC Defenders. He does radio for MLB Radio. The man does it all. And on top of that, he just got called maybe a month and a half ago to do a couple Nats games on MASN. The one, the only, the legendary Grant Paulsen joins us right now. Grant, we appreciate the time, sir. How are you today?
Fellas, what's going on? How are you, Josh and Dan? What's up?
Not too much, sir. We appreciate you taking the time to do this first and foremost. So the first question I have, I mean, getting back into the swing of things, it must feel nice getting back in studio after this long pandemic. And everybody was working from home, essentially recording from home, the shows and whatnot. So what's it like being back in studio? What did you like it better staying at home recording your radio show, or did you like it better in studio?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there are benefits to both. I'll say first, I think it was great for the industry that we found out what we can do, and I guess in some ways what we can't do. But more importantly, that you can do shows on the move, that you can take the technology and the electronics with you now and do shows from your basement as I did, or from your laundry room as Danny, my co-host, did, or, wherever you need to be. I think some of us this year, when we go on little vacations, maybe we'll go to the beach a few days longer, but actually do shows from the beach for those extra days or what have you. So I think the technology is there, and it was good for our industry to see that we can get by, and that by and large, it's not going to ruin the listening experience for people. Having said that, I'm thrilled to be back in studio. I was lucky because I have two young kids. I have a 2-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old son, and being around them and my wife, day in and day out, more than I ever really have been before, was a blessing and was a really cool, wonderful thing at that age where they're doing all these neat things for the first time, and I got to be there. Having said that, it can be a little bit distracting. It is a little bit different trying to, as anybody can relate, like work from home, because when you got a little kid, they don't understand that you're at work. They see you at home and they think you're at home. This isn't work time. So getting back in studio has been refreshing to kind of recharge the batteries, be able to look Danny in the eye, pick up on things he likes and energies that he has. Just being, on mic, I think it sounds a little bit better naturally, and the energy is a little bit more authentic. So there's definitely benefits. I'm happy to be back, but it was cool to have the experience to do it from home. A year was as long as I needed, though, for now. Let's get back in the studio and rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing is just looking at the amount of networks having to adapt to change, such as calling games from your basement, essentially. You saw Kevin Harlan do it from his basement to NBA on TNT. Just one name that popped in the front of my head. But I mean, adapting during this change, I mean, I think it just goes to show, God forbid, if something like this were to happen again, networks have a plan to keep people engaged in sporting events. But God forbid we never have to go through this again.
Right. No, I think you're on to something, Josh. I think that's true. I think, there is a better plan now. And we saw, again, like what worked and I think by default what didn't. I would say this, like my hope as someone in this industry, and you guys as people breaking into this business, I'm sure can relate. And you still want companies to do things the right way. So while it was really cool that Turner Sports or ESPN or anybody else was able to set these elite broadcasters up to broadcast from their living room, and they were so good at it that they were able to pull it off. Locally we get spoiled because Joe Beninati calling Caps games is calling games from the Bethesda studios, not traveling to the arena. And you would never know it because he's so good at it. Charlie Slow's Dave Jagler every night calling Nats games on the Fan on 106.7. You don't know that they're not traveling with the team. That's good and bad, though, because I think my fear is that these networks may say, well, wait a second, we can save hundreds of thousands of dollars in TV, maybe less than that in radio. We could save money by not sending these broadcasters on the road. And I think that would be a bad thing all the way around for the business. I think there's a right way to do things, a wrong way to do things. So, yeah, we can broadcast from home if need be, in Kevin Harlan's case for a big game a year ago. But with the world opening back up, let's do things the right way. Let's get broadcasters back in venues, back in facilities, travel them the way that it should be done, and not cheat the viewers, the listeners of that experience, that authenticity that they deserve either.
Absolutely. So before we get into sort of more background, because there's a lot I want to ask you about, Grant. You recently got a call from your network producer, if I remember correctly. I read it in a Washington paper. I forget which one, but you were offered the chance to do Nats games on MASN. What was that like? You've never done a baseball game. I know you've done MLB radio, but to actually call a game in the booth, what was that like for you? Because a hometown guy, an hour and a half away from DC where you grew up, and it must have been a thrill for you to call those games.
Yeah, it was amazing. I grew up a diehard Baltimore Orioles fan. Obviously, the Nationals didn't exist. At this point, I go to Nats Park dozens of times a year and watch every game and consider myself someone that kind of lives and dies with what happens with the team, obviously. And we talk about them, more on my show every day than probably any show in town because we got the longest show. We're 4.5 hours and we love the Nats, Danny and I. So needless to say, it meant a ton to me to get the call. I mean, the way it worked out was initially on a Friday night, I got a call asking if I could be involved in the radio broadcast on Saturday and Sunday. And while I was elated, I had a very short time to prep. It was like close to 10 p.m. and the game was on Saturday afternoon. The next day we were going on at noon or whatever. So I jumped at the opportunity because why wouldn't I? I said, absolutely. But I thought I was doing radio. It turned out a couple hours later, kind of after midnight, I found out I was doing TV. I have called baseball games as a play-by-play broadcaster, both at the minor league level, high school games, all kinds of baseball through the years. Having said that, I've never done color commentary of any sport at any level, TV or radio. Obviously, for people who may not know, play-by-play, when you're actually calling the action, a lot of times is more of just a traditional, learned broadcaster who learned on the fly and taught themselves as they went. Color is someone who relies upon the experience of playing or coaching. And so that analyst a lot of the times played the game at the major league level or managed in the dugout. And so people are used to that. So that was my concern. I wasn't worried about the broadcast. I wasn't worried about what I would say or not knowing enough. I was worried that I wouldn't be given the chance because people would be upset because I didn't play for the Nationals or, would be mad about some opinion I had 2 years ago or something. So those were my only concerns, but it was a thrill of a lifetime. It was an unbelievable experience. I got to do 2 games on Saturday and Sunday. Both Patrick Corbin and Max Scherzer threw gems, and the Nats won both games pretty handily over the Marlins. The first couple of days there in May. I think they're in a sweep against Miami. And I couldn't have enjoyed my experience more. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever done in the business.
It was a very kind gesture of Nats PR too, to get you that lineup card and game ball as well for doing that.
Yeah, that was really cool. I've actually got it in the basement down here. At least the ball, we actually sent the lineup card off. I'm getting it framed so I can hang on the wall. But
awesome.
Yeah, so they went and grabbed it for me. Kyle Brostowitz from Nats PR started a tradition a couple of years ago when broadcasters work their first game that they've done a few times now. And so we went and grabbed one of the lineup cards out of the dugout. It's obviously signed before the game by Davey, and you got a game ball authenticated and really, really neat keepsake for me. Hopefully it's not the last game I ever work. I can't imagine I work another game as a color commentator. But I have aspirations of calling play-by-play at the big league level at some point. So, it's a nice goal, kind of like getting your mouth on the water fountain and tasting a little water and getting pulled away. So now I know what I'm missing and I'm hungry to get back.
How would you compare doing broadcasting on radios, for example, like a Nats game or MLB game in general, to doing it on television. Obviously, on TV, you have graphics and other ways to depict information. And on radio, you kind of have to, lay everything out visually, theater of the mind sort of thing. So how would you compare those two things? And do you enjoy radio more? Do you like describing everything more carefully, or do you enjoy TV where you kind of have the benefit of the audience has a look that, they can see certain things, as opposed to on radio where they can't see anything?
Yeah, it's a good question, Dan. I mean, for me, I prefer radio. Now, I love both. I mean, I would gladly do a radio assignment, a TV assignment, as long as I'm getting to call a game. I don't care what sport it is, what game it is, what level it is,
Right.
or frankly, what network it's on. Like, give me the mic and let's rock and roll. Radio is my answer. There's a romanticism to it, in my opinion. As a listener, I enjoy it. I listen to it. I watch Bob Carpenter, who's amazing, and all of the TV guys in town that we're spoiled with. I think Joby and Locker specifically for Caps games are an absolute treat, and they're just legendary and iconic. But I'll listen to Charlie and Dave night in and night out, walking the dog and doing things. I've grown up listening to baseball on the radio, specifically baseball and football. I think there's just something to those two sports. I love this idea. You talked about laying things out. I call it painting a picture.
Yep.
You are the eyes for the audience, and there is a responsibility there that I find so neat. You are at the game, and you are experiencing this game for everybody else. I think that I'm getting chills thinking about it. Like, it's one of the coolest things to me. So, the difference really is TV is an economy of words, as I call it. If you're calling a game on television, I don't want to say you say as little as possible, but that's a good place to start. If it's a fly ball to center field on the radio, you'll say driven to center. Let's say Victor Robles drifting back into his left. Now he camps under. He reaches up with one arm over his head. He makes the catch. 2 outs. He throws the ball back into the infield. If you're calling that same play on TV, you can say fly ball. Robles has it. 2 down. The picture has worked for itself. So would I say it's easier to do TV? Possibly. I mean, there's fewer words, but it's its own art. I mean, you can
Right.
overtalk. You can, try to do too much. That there are things you can get wrong on TV that, make it just as difficult. So I prefer, if I have my druthers, radio. I'm a baseball and football fiend. Those are the two sports I desperately want to call. It's kind of my ultimate goal. That's what I want to work toward as a play-by-play person. And I'm hoping to get more opportunities in those sports. But I've kind of enjoyed whatever I've gotten to call in either of the two phases.
So I want to touch on sort of more of your background. You're a local guy from King George County, if I researched correctly. And you, as a kid, covered sports for WUSA, and you covered the Super Bowl for David Letterman. So what I'm trying to get at here, Grant, is how young were you when you decided you wanted to cover sports? Was this something that you wanted to do since you were a little kid and they sort of reached out to you? Or how did that opportunity come about for you?
Yeah, so I started credentialed access and kind of interviewing sports figures and doing media stuff, as I'll call it, like TV mostly at the time when I was very young. So I would have been 10 years old, kind of freshly 10, right around 1999, something like that. But at the time, it wasn't like I was qualified or, nobody was coming for me for the real scoop or whatever. I was basically, a fast talking kid, kind of a novelty, fun little story. You see on some of these shows sometimes, like the kid that knows all the names of all the presidents and where they were born and what year, or like there's a girl on Ellen who knows every body part or whatever it is. Like, so
Right.
I was kind of doing that, but as a sports kid, and I memorized stats and numbers, and I didn't do it to go on TV. I did it because I was that was my fascination. That was my addiction. That was what I cared about. It's what I loved. It was my passion. Like all my buddies would watch Saturday morning cartoons and I'd watch highlights. I'd watch every Orioles game every single night. And I'd read about the then Redskins constantly. And I mean, everything I read was sports related or biographies or autobiographies or what have you. So, I did all that. And I got into this playful argument with my uncle, who was a radio personality in Pittsburgh way back in the late 90s. And he brought me on his show to do football picks one time. And that was like a one-off, I thought, kind of a fun little thing. And he made a bit out of it where, he called me his sports bookie, his 10-year-old sports bookie. And I gave him betting lines and gave him some like predictions on the money line or whatever else. Took some point spreads for upcoming NFL games. And then we started doing that weekly. A local newspaper in King George, you were right, King George County did a story called the King George Journal. They got a good reaction. They had me start penning a little column, like 100 words, a little paragraph a week in the little paper that came out weekly. Then the local TV station, Channel 9, saw that. They did a story on me, like doing these radio hits in this little column. And I went up and did football picks for them, and it went pretty well. So they had me come up each week during the football season and do picks. And these little things would kind of lead on in that way. And then I got some fun breaks. Like you said, I got to do the Letterman show and some other really cool national shows out of it. So that was kind of how it all started and how it all unfolded. That run from when I was about 10 lasted until I was like 17 or so. At that time, I wasn't as cute or young or funny. People were like, "Oh, this guy's got a beard now." Like, the first time I've shaved in 2 years, I never not have a beard. But this guy's got a beard and he's not a kid anymore. He's not cute. Like, get him out of here. So I went to college and kept my fingers in the pie, and kept broadcasting at XM and doing some different shows here and there. But, went to George Mason University and eventually got the job as the beat reporter at the Fan and kind of launched my local 1067 career, like 2.0, if you will, through that.
Yeah. So when I hear that story about when you started from 10 to 17, it just seems like to me, you just worked your way up, you're grinding, and you're getting to where you want to be, just like us. I started this podcast 3 years ago, and looking at people like you and the sports junkies, I just interviewed JP just a week or two ago. It gives us motivation to grind and work harder and just climb up the ladder to get to where we want to be.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would tell you guys, keep working hard and congratulations on everything you've accomplished. And we've met and chatted several times. I know at the Caps practice facility, among other, venues, obviously. But I think there's a couple things I'd say about that. I mean, I got a lot of cool opportunities. I was very lucky to get at a young age. There's no doubt about that. But you have to be prepared when you get opportunities, right? So getting the opportunity is one thing, but if you don't do anything with it, what good was it? I used to like a quote my mom actually passed along to me years and years ago from Oprah Winfrey. That's who she attributed it to. Now, I don't know if she actually said it. My mom gives Oprah a lot of credit. She loves her. But the quote was, "Luck is being prepared." And so, when the Nats or, whoever calls and says, "Can you do a game tomorrow?" Like, if I haven't been watching baseball or living kind of my job and living what I want to do and be, then that may not have gone the way I wanted it to 24 hours later. So, I think you got to want it. You got to be passionate about it, obviously. And I've been really lucky I don't consider it a job, but to get to work in a field that is also my biggest passion, outside of my family and life. And then to you guys, I would say you're ahead of it. You're crushing it because, as I think I've told you before, Josh, I mean, there is so much technology now, and there are so many avenues for people to hone their skills. Like it's funny to say when I was growing up, I'm not old or anything, but like when I was a young guy doing this, there weren't really like podcasts where you would just like hit up a person on the local radio and we'd Zoom for a little while one night. Like that wasn't a thing. You couldn't necessarily have your own Twitter account and kind of be your own beat reporter. Like that's now happening. Whereas I think the waters are kind of being muddied between, the writers at these big papers and people who work for themselves and, the big show that's on a FM radio station versus a really successful podcast. Like people can get their own reps. They can write their own blog. They can have their own website. And if it's good, people are going to dig it. Like, you don't need to have a credential from some billion-dollar company. Nobody cares. Like, if your content is legit, if your show is entertaining, if your guests are good, in our case, or if you're writing and your insight is different and your analysis is spot on, I think people are going to enjoy it. So I think you guys are doing the right thing. And that's kind of the advice like I always have gotten and given to people over the last several years when I talk to anybody trying to crack the game.
Yeah, we appreciate that greatly. That is great advice. Once again, Grant Paulsen, you can find him on Twitter at Grant H. Paulsen, host of Grant and Danny on 106.7 The Fan. So I want to go back. You said you started the beat on 106.7. When did it turn into getting on the radio?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I joined 106.7 so they flipped to sports from like the all talk's not the right phrase, like guy talk-ish, like the superstation that they were. I don't know if you guys remember, but before they were sports talk, it was 106.7 was, it was Don and Mike had become Mike O'Mara, Big O and Dukes, the sports junkies. So at that time, when they flipped in 09 to FM 106.7, which was the Fan, to do sports talk, I'd been reaching out, a million times to the program director back then, who's still the program director, my boss now. And, he had been getting flooded with people, and it was really hard to hear back, and he didn't seem particularly interested. My buddy got a job as the beat reporter covering the Washington football team, and that was Chris Russell, who has been around the market now for years and years covering the team on both stations. And he got the beat reporter job, and this was in 2009, the first year of the station. I knew him really well through XM Radio, where we worked together. He knew that I'd been around the team and knew several of the players through interviews I'd done and things for a long time. And he kind of asked, hey, could I bring this guy, me, in as like my assistant? At the time, I was 20 years old or so, and I was in college. And at the time, the program director was cool with it, gave me that opportunity and said, yeah, let's do it. He could be your assistant. So I basically just did whatever he wanted all season long. He needed me to, track something down, look up stats, go get audio. Hey, you go put your mic in over here. And so I just kind of helped him with whatever he needed. I wasn't really on the air at all necessarily in that season, largely. I did a couple of updates here or there, a hit on a show once or twice a month or something. After that season, my boss gave me the opportunity to cover the Wizards. That was leading up to the NBA draft when they took John Wall. And so I went to the draft. He sent me to the draft, which is such a cool opportunity for a young broadcaster to be our live reporter all night long. And so I was at the draft site. Then I went to all the Wizards games and filed reports. And that's when I started being on the air, with at the time LeVar Arrington and Chad Dukes. I think Mike Wise may have been doing the midday show. And yeah, I would file, reports or just do talk segments on the Wizards. And I would get to host occasionally at night as a sidekick with people as a number 2 voice on the show, maybe a weekend fill in here or there. The next year, 2010, that was when I then got the job on the beat. So Chris Russell, who I had mentioned, left to go to another station. That job was vacant. My boss did a bunch of interviews. I had been kind of the assistant. He promoted me. And that's when almost every single day, several days a week, several times a day, I should say, I was on the air doing reports. And that kind of launched me being on the station a whole lot.
And then from there, I assume it went to Grant and Danny. How'd you get paired up with Danny? Because I know it's probably been years of you two being on the air, but it just seems like you and Danny connect so well. And every time I listen to the show, and for you, Dan, I'm not speaking for Dan, but I assume he agrees with what I say here. And like, you all just have an incredible bond, and you just feed off of each other, and it produces a really great show. So how'd that get started?
So we would do shows together at night a bunch. And he was, I don't know if he was full-time yet when we started doing that, but eventually kind of became a full-time night host when I was on the beat still. But I would come in and chill with him, and we'd talk ball, or we'd have players on, the phone, and I'd come hang out. So we did a bunch of radio together. We were friendly. We enjoyed each other. We really didn't have necessarily a say in it or like pick each other per se. Not to say that we wouldn't have. We liked working with each other. I'll speak for myself. I loved working with him a lot. But my my boss, when they made a change in midday, so I had just finished my 4th season on the beat in 2013. They made a change where the host with Danny had left the station and there was a vacancy. And so they brought me in and put me with Danny. Not like they asked him. So for all I know, he was furious. I'm kidding. But so they paired us together. We worked together a little bit in the past at night. And that was our first show together was January 6th of 2014. So we're now in our 8th year doing shows together. Obviously the first 7 pretty much of those years in middays and now an afternoon drive over the last few months.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but sort of a late congratulations, but y'all got the afternoon drive. The morning and the afternoon drive is, in my opinion, one of the most listened to radio. So from 10 to 2 to 2 to 6, is there a big difference there, or is it just the time slot in your opinion?
Yeah, we're pretty much going to do the same show, right? I mean, there's a couple of differences. I think I'm sure that some radio lifer who run stations could tell you audiences in the evening drive coming home or afternoon drive may prefer that a midday audience might not. I mean, we really, enjoyed what we were doing in the middle of the day and it was working. We were having a lot of success ratings wise and just over the years, it was a hit and we're lucky and it worked out. I think it's kind of a natural graduation, so to speak, when there was a vacancy in afternoon drive that we got that opportunity, which is a thrill, obviously. We're not really doing anything that different. I mean, we've tweaked a couple of the segments we do and little things just to freshen the show up and put a fresh coat of paint on it. I think the job is still the same. We're going to talk about the topics in sports and in life that people care the most about every single day. We're going to try to engage and entertain people. And we're going to try to, I still like to inform. I think that's important. I think, doing a smart show and an entertaining show can be done. And that's, I hope, what we do. And I know some people will laugh at that, but I like learning when I listen to the radio. I like listening to shows that, tell me things I didn't know before. So we try to do a little bit of all of that. And we have a lot of fun too, and talk about a lot of non-sports. It's going to be exciting to see as the world gets back to normal, like people start commuting traditionally again. Are things going to revert back to how they used to be? Like a lot of people are now working from home. A lot of people's hours at the office have changed. So the clock, as we've always known it in radio, of drive time is when people are in their cars. It's a little bit different right now, honestly. So we're kind of figuring this all out as we go with everybody else.
What would you say are the ingredients that you guys have used? You mentioned a couple things there. Obviously having a smart show and entertaining show sort of, side by side. But what would you say has, have you learned that has helped created your show and take it to the level that it is now, where it's very well known?
Yeah, I think a few things. I mean, hopefully, I think like anything, right? There's shows we do that are great and there's shows that aren't our best, like you always beat yourself up. I mean, my goal every single day, like Danny and I have similar thoughts on this. Like, we're not splitting the atom, we're not saving lives. Let's have fun. Let's make sure that when people listen to us, they feel something, whatever that is. Sometimes people are going to love what we say and they're going to point at their radio and go, haha, yeah, he's right. Sometimes they're going to hate my opinion, and that's okay too. I mean, you don't have to like or agree with everything I say. Hopefully people laugh every time they listen for a segment or two. I want that to happen. It's not always going to be funny, but hopefully it's entertaining and people think. But the part that I do that is important to me, it's not like I'm some like big journalist or anything, but I do, coming from the background of covering teams, being someone who's been in locker rooms and been on a beat, like I think there is a place for informed talk, and that can sound like stuffy or like someone's wearing a shirt and tie, and that's not what I mean. But just having people throw out topics and that may or may not happen. Like, I don't enjoy watching a lot of the shows that are on in the middle of the day on TV where they ask crazy questions and like a guy has a bad game and and you turn on the TV and like this font the next day says, should he retire? Or like whatever the dumb topic is, right? That may or may not work sometimes in radio, but like, that's not what I want to do. I want to talk about things people care about in ways that are interesting. And I want to try to, when you listen, maybe you'll hear something you didn't know. Maybe you learn a little bit, but main thing is hopefully you have fun. And hopefully you feel like, we're a couple of dudes you could hang out with drinking a soda or a beer at a bar. I mean, that's kind of the goal.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Absolutely.
I feel like it's a show where y'all just have fun, like you mentioned. And like you gear it towards sports, but there are those non-sports segments that make it all the more interesting. So Grant, before we move any further, I want to get your quick thoughts on these two. The AFL, you covered them doing the play-by-play for the Washington Valor, and the play-by-play for the XFL team, the DC Defenders. Unfortunately, the AFL went under, filed for bankruptcy, and then the pandemic hit. The XFL went under, but we're hearing sort of reports that I think Dwayne Johnson bought.
Dwayne Johnson.
If I'm correct, is this actually happening? Do you think the XFL will make its return? And if that's the case, will you be back calling games for the DC Defenders?
Yeah, so that the plan, first of all, is that the XFL is going to come back. So that's exciting. They have not announced where the teams will be, like who gets a team and who doesn't. To my knowledge, I don't think it's known at this point if DC will get one of those teams. I would hope that it would, because DC really supported the team. I mean, if you go back, the attendance in DC was fantastic. In cold weather, like chilly environments. I mean, it was freezing in a couple of those games I was at. They were getting 15,000 people at Audi Field. There's also an immaculate venue for it. I don't know if you guys have been to Audi Field for soccer games where DC United.
Haven't had the pleasure yet, no.
Got to go check it out. It's really cool. The Spirit play there as well, obviously. Like, it was perfect for this league, for XFL football. Some of the stadiums where the NFL stadiums were being used, it didn't look right, in my opinion. But this, it's like a smaller stadium with a couple rungs. It was really perfect. But people were into it. They had beer snakes, like Wrigley Field bleachers in the end zone. Yeah. It was very, very cool experience. I really enjoyed it. So I would hope DC would get a team. And if they got a team, I would, try to put my name in the hat to get back in the mix calling games, depending on how it all worked out. I had a blast the first time. I mean, I mean it when I say, like, calling baseball, calling football, like, that's when I'm in my element. That's when I'm my happiest. That's what I love to do. So that would be really, really cool. But I think there's a lot of bridges to cross from a league standpoint before I would even, figure out if we're going to have a team or not. But hopefully it works, because I'd like to think there's a place for a league like that. And hopefully one day the NFL can somehow get on board and help one of these leagues to survive, to kind of boost the Q rating of football in the offseason.
Yeah, because there have been 3 leagues, the Alliance of American Football, and the XFL and AFL, and 2 of the 3 went under for good, and the XFL making a comeback, obviously. But it seems to be an issue that these startup leagues, for players who can't make it to the NFL or are not experienced enough, just can't seem to stay afloat, and it's because of money, and they just don't make enough revenue.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. First of all, the Arena Football League, in fairness, like, unlike those other leagues, it existed for over 30 years. And it had a heyday where there was a time when I was growing up when the Arena Football League was huge. They had games on NBC, and like Jay Gruden, the former coach of the Washington football team, was a quarterback and a coach, and like was a star nationally from that league. So it did succeed at one point. I don't know if those days are done. And I know the league is under, but what I mean is if that is something that can no longer happen, if there's just too many things going on that time of the year. It's a fair question. It's something we talk about on the show a lot. I do think for any of those leagues to survive, the NFL would probably have to get behind them and maybe work something out where they feel like they're getting a benefit from these leagues and developing players, promoting, maybe testing rules, all kinds of things like that. A la like a minor league baseball or something. And then they invest in the league itself, like a G League for basketball or what have you. If that were to happen, I think it might work. Right now, the NFL probably feels like, well, we have college football. We don't necessarily need that, which may well be a nice counterpoint. But look, I love ball. I like watching it year round. I hope it works. I think that, there are others, like there's a league I saw on TV a few weeks ago I know very little about, called the Spring League. But like, that's something that's on, and people, very few people know it. So I feel like these things always pop up, and nothing's hit lately. That's for sure.
All right. So I want to talk about something that is absolutely hilarious. First off, I want to ask, how much more popularity has your show gained after your co-host Danny made it on national TV imitating Charles Barkley?
A perfect impression, by the way.
Yeah, it's an incredible impression. His Charles Barkley is unbelievable. I would say, certainly on a national level, for those couple of days, I mean, it considerably boosted our Q rating. Like, hopefully people are still checking out the show or finding it through that. I'm not really sure. But for those few days when that impression was viral and all over the internet, it certainly wasn't bad for business. So I think it was a huge success for us. And I'm really happy for him that it happened. He's been doing that impression since I met him. And I think he told me he's been doing it for 16 years.
My God.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and I heard it for the first time, within a week of meeting him back in 2009, I think is when I first met him. And when I heard it the first time, I said, that's the best Charles Barkley impression I've ever heard. I like Caliendo. I was
going to say,
like, Danny's Barkley is better than Caliendo's and everyone else's. And I mean that. So it was really, really funny that of all, like, he's done this impression thousands of times and posted it online hundreds of times and tagged, probably NBA on TNT or anybody else, like dozens of times, right? And that time it went viral, and the internet's so weird. I think one person retweeted it and another person saw it and retweeted it. And then Greg Anthony, the former NBA player, retweeted it, who's got a huge following in basketball. And that kind of kicked it into the NBA.
The next realm. Yeah.
Yeah, like NBA Twitter. And next thing you know, it was all over the place. And Ernie Johnson from TNT saw it, and then they played it, and next day he was on TNT to talk to Barkley. So it's just a nice, like, it shows you how the internet works, right? I mean, it's hilarious. So it was really cool for him. He's ultra talented. He's an incredible impressionist. He's very, very funny. Really, really good comedian, and he's been a blast to do the show with for a long time. So it was really cool for him, and it was exciting for me to see him kind of get his shine, and hopefully, more comes from it, and it's not over yet.
And you had the opportunity to actually interview Charles Barkley on your show too. What was that like? Was he just doing the whole Charles Barkley impression the entire interview?
Super cool. What's funny is we had Charles Barkley on for 2 segments for 45 minutes.
My gosh.
Danny didn't do the Barkley impression one time.
Wow.
When we originally got him on, the plan was you got to do the impression for him at some point. We ended up having such a good, thorough, fun, kind of at times deep conversation with him that it never came up. I mean, for people that aren't familiar with my show, I mean, if you're going to podcast an interview with someone, you should track down our interview with Barkley, because it was really, really cool just to talk to a guy who was a legend when I was growing up. A huge name. I mean, that's one of the biggest names we'll get on this calendar year, obviously, and top 10 in show history easily. But for him to be so gracious with his time, we ended the segment and he said, I'll come back on, we'll keep going. And we talked to him again. I mean, it was really, really cool. But we talked about everything from, the NBA playoffs that were going on, to the time he gained 25 pounds in 24 hours, to the time he let Scott Brooks live in his house, the former coach of the Wizards, to his agent stealing money from him, to why he hates Skip Bayless. I mean, it was a really all-inclusive interview. It was pretty crazy, but we had a lot of fun with it.
I think he has a lot of commonality with people who hate Skip Bayless, so he's definitely not alone with that one.
He's making a lot of money though, so he'll be all right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask Grant, do you think Danny could do a Grant Paulsen impression?
I mean, he could definitely do an impression of things I would say and probably of my cadence. I've heard him do not quite an impression. Like, I don't think he can do my voice. I'm not sure. I'll ask him tomorrow. That's actually a great question. I think I guarantee he just has been around me too long. Like, I could do a caricature of him, like the types of things he would say or how he acts or whatever. And when you're around someone at least 20 hours a week for 8 straight years, like, I see him a lot of the time, like more than I see my wife. Like today, as an example, I'll have seen Danny way more than I saw my wife, like unequivocally. So having said that, like he could probably do me, but I don't think he has like my voice. It wouldn't be an impression like his Barkley or some of his others. It'd be more of like a caricature, I would say. That's a good question. I have not been asked that before.
This is sort of a random question, but I think it kind of ties into all this. Has there been an interview that you've done or participated in that you were like really impressed by the person you were interviewing? Like you walked away from it and you're like, damn, like that was a really good interview and time just flew by. Has there been anybody who you've spoken with or interviewed who you felt like that was the case?
Yeah, that happens a good bit. Like when you get a great interview, I love that. Josh Bell recently is the best example of that with the Nationals. We had him on just a couple of weeks ago, maybe less, about a week ago. He was sensational. I loved talking to him, and I would kill to have him back on the show soon in a longer forum. I like getting guys on and actually being able to let your hair down for 30 or 40 minutes and slice it into a couple segments. I think that was like a 10-minute chat, but in that time, I was blown away with him. So that's the most recent example. Non-1067 The Fan, I do this show on MLB Network Radio called Minors and Majors when I talk to prospects in Major League Baseball, kids in the minor leagues. Mm-hmm. There's been a long list over the years of guys that have blown me away where, they're 18 or 19 getting ready for the draft in high school. They're 21 in college or they're in the minors, riding buses at 22. And I'm like, man, that guy sounded like he was 30. That was awesome. There's a kid that plays for the Mariners now named Taylor Trammell, who I remember the first time I ever talked to him in high school. I remember the interview like it was yesterday, and he's in the big leagues now. And I'm talking about when he was 18. But it was one of the most impressive conversations I'd ever had with anyone. And one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. He jumps out as one that I would recall. But that definitely happens where you're kind of moved and you think, wow, that was so cool to talk to that guy. So those are a couple I would put on the short list. Just either, in the case of Bell recently or just all time, like a younger guy that stood out. But it's interesting. I think someone's got to let you in a little bit for that. Like if they're just doing an interview, like they would just talk to, like they're doing your conversation and they're moving on doing something else. Like you're not going to feel that. And it's really got to be either because they just decided that day they're going to be engaging or because you had a connection where they at some point, they're like, okay, this dude gets it. Or it's like in the case of you guys, it's like, all right, these guys are cool. Let's throw the ball around. And like, they give you something, right? And that's, to me, you can feel it. Like it's this special thing during an interview where like, all right, this is it. This hit, this is really, really good. And that's one of those things sometimes where that happens and you feel awesome.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, that's really great. So enough talking about you, Grant. I know you probably talk a lot about this on different shows, but I want to get into some sports. And with our co-host and lead contributor, Dan Dempsky, on this exclusive interview with us today, I think this sports thing I have ties in well to Dan Dempsky. You recently attended a Bowie Bay Sox game to see prospect Adley Rutschman through the Orioles system. Did he look pretty good? How close is he to be getting called up to the major leagues for the Orioles?
Yeah, he's knocking on the door at this point, right? Decisions aren't always made for rebuilding teams like Baltimore as far as calling a player up just based on when a guy is ready. They could be ready to hit and play at the major league level and not get called up because you're holding them back for arbitration reasons or to not start a clock or because you don't want to maybe to be a part of that losing culture for part of that season or whatever the reason is. With Wander Franco having graduated, he was just at Nats Park this week with the Tampa Bay Rays. He's the number one prospect in all of baseball. Rutschman is very likely to kind of take over as maybe the game's number one prospect, as a switch hitting catcher with power who calls his own game and has elite leadership skills. I'm really intrigued by the skill set, and I'm fascinated by the player he's going to become. He's the real deal. The night I saw him, like, the results were not great. I want to say he grounded into a double play, flew out. Didn't have a hit in the game, but he was hitting a little under 300 with about a dozen home runs, I think, on the day that I saw him week and a half ago or so. And you could just tell. Sometimes you could tell that a guy has an advanced approach. I mean, the last time I was at that ballpark and felt that impressed about a guy's idea at the plate and game plan as a hitter was when I saw Juan Soto in Double-A in one of the couple of weeks that he was in 2A, and he went to Bowie right before he got called up in a game that I went to see against the Bay Sox. So Rutschman had that. Like, he spit on some pitchers' pitches. He took some stuff right off the plate. A lot of guys go up there hacking in the minors or swinging awful pitches they can't do anything with. And Rutschman did not do that. Like, he's going to make you earn it. He's got more walks than strikeouts, which is indicative of having a plan and being disciplined. Like, those are the things that stood out to me about seeing him.
Yeah, that's really great to hear that. I know the Orioles are a rebuilding team. I'm not going to rub it in Dan's face too much, but what
it is what it is.
What do you
They're
think?
All right, though. I mean, they got some good, like, the night I saw Rutschman, their number one pitching prospect, a kid named Grayson Rodriguez, was throwing. Mm-hmm. And Rodriguez was an 11th overall pick in the draft out of a Texas high school back in 2018. Oh. And the actual reason I wanted to see Adley, obviously, but I'd seen him. I wanted to watch Rodriguez pitch, and he touched 101 and he sat 99 and a bunch of triple-digit fastballs. Wow. It's not just about the velocity. Like, he's got 4+ pitches, and he looks like an ace. I mean, this guy is big. He's like 6'5" and 235. He's thick. So I think he's going to be a front of the rotation starter for a long time. And their system's pretty good. Like, it was really bad a couple of years ago. Mike Elias came over from Houston. That entire front office has really done a good job investing in the minor leagues and building something where they've created a talent pool that creates some competition, and guys have gotten better. Even the guys they inherited that were drafted, like Grayson Rodriguez was actually drafted, I think, right before Elias took over. Like, those guys were one thing, and they're now better because of the analytics and the technology and some of the things that they've applied. So I wouldn't feel too bad for Dan. He's going to be all right here in a year or two.
Oh, man. So, that minor league scene, there have been some issues. I think Dan even pointed this out. Some Orioles minor leaguers were debating on whether to sleep in their cars because they can't afford hotels. I mean, there's some stuff like that with the minor league situation, but I mean, the whole minor league experience, just attending a game, I really enjoy that. So tying into my next question, have you gotten a chance to travel down to Fredericksburg to see the new Fred Nats facility by chance?
Funny you asked that. So I lived in King George, which is about 25 minutes from there, my whole life until I was 18. I'm going to, and I don't know when we're posting the podcast, so it may end up being that people hear this right after I did it. But on Thursday, I'll be doing my show from the Fred Nats Stadium because I'm going to the game on Thursday night. So I wanted to go to the game. My buddy got me tickets because, we have the ability with the technology, as I mentioned, to do the show kind of on location. I talked to my boss, thought it was a cool idea. So we're going to be broadcasting from the ballpark. So I'll see the ballpark in person in the house for the first time and maybe get a little ticket and then watch the game that night to get to watch a little minor league ball. I'm with you. I love the minor leagues. I've been going to minor league games since I was a kid. It was too expensive for my family to regularly go to MLB games. And we went a few times a year for sure. A couple here and there, but it was easier for us to go see the Richmond Braves or whatever. So we would get in for a couple bucks on dollar night and get a $1 hot dog and a t-shirt and everything. And I love the minor leagues. And at the time, it was baseball. I didn't know who the players were. And now I like it for a whole nother reason. Like, I'm in on the prospects and trying to see who's who in each team's system and whatnot. But it's a really, really cool thing.
Yeah. So let's shift our focus. I want to talk about the Washington Wizards for a little bit. I know recently they had to let go head coach Scott Brooks. They could not come to terms on a contract. Do you know anything about how close they are to getting a new head coach, Grant? And what direction do you think the Wizards will go from here?
Yeah, the only thing that's been reported at this point is that they're looking for an assistant who was on one of the good teams in the NBA this past season, maybe the last few years, which is, I think, what they should be doing. I'm not digging or doing any reporting on it. I'm kind of tracking it from afar, so that's as much as I know. I mean, for me, I want someone who's going to bring an attention to detail on the defensive end of the floor to allow them to get some stops, other than in the final minute or so of a game, just based on effort. Like, I'd like to actually, and I know it's the NBA in 2021, so it is what it is. People are going to score, and you're going to get buckets, and everyone's going to spread you out and hit threes. That's fine, but I would like to defend the rim and play defense in a way that the last couple of years was just not seemingly a big enough priority. I want to go to the best places right now where they have the most success and pluck assistants. I always say I'm a sous chef guy. What do I mean by that? Well, you go to the best restaurant, you talk to the chef, and you say, who's your right-hand man? Or in the NBA's case, with Becky Hammon, who's your right-hand woman? And whoever that is, call them, talk to them, see if they could come in and potentially work for you. So that would be my plan. The best teams over the last several years who are what you want to become culturally, you talk to the top 2 or 3 assistants on every one of those staffs, and whoever's got the best presentation and plan and blows you away the most, you offer them the job, and let's get rolling.
Yeah. So the Wizards had an 0.6 chance of making it into the playoffs. And I feel like they really turned things around after the Westbrook Wall trade. What were your thoughts when you saw the Wizards finally win that play-in tournament? Unfortunately, only winning one game against the 76ers in the first round, but that must have been a crazy roller coaster for Wizards fans.
Oh, okay. I mean, it was the best. The stretch run of that season was amazing. They were left for dead by a lot of people, including myself. I want to say they were 6-17 through 23 games. I mean, it was really bad. But Westbrook played at an MVP level. Beal chased a scoring title. I thought the Daniel Gafford trade was monstrous for them. The athleticism he provided. I talked about rim protection. I mean, that guy was throwing shots like Sam Dalembert and Dikembe Mutombo in their primes. It was cool to watch him as just an energizer bunny. I wanted him to get more minutes and start. And didn't always happen the way I wanted it to, but they became a good product again, which is important. I care about that. I know that a lot of people just care about winning titles, and you got to get to the playoffs. You got to win playoff games. And I agree. That's the goal. I believe that an executive's job is to have the right process. The results will follow. I'm a process-oriented guy. So put together a good program from the bottom up, all the way to the top. And, eventually it'll work out. Like Ted Leonsis did it with the Capitals. They should have more than one cup to show for what they've done. Generally, if you do it the way they've done it for as long as they have, and you've been in the playoffs as that good of a team for this long and had that many bites at the apples, you'd normally net 2, maybe 3 cups. It's only been 1. That's discouraging and disappointing, frankly. But guess what? They won a championship. To me, that's how I would do it. That's how I want teams to do it, is have a good process, be a good product, be fun for me to watch every single night, couple of hours away from my life, entertain me, win games, and let's see where this thing goes. I had no delusions of grandeur. They weren't going to get to the conference final this year. They weren't going to win a championship. So to have the run they did, I was happy with that. I thought that they should have moved on from Scott Brooks. They have. I want them to get a new head coach. They're going to, and let's see where they go with it.
Absolutely. Great insight on the Washington Wizards. Once again, talking to Grant Paulsen at Grant H. Paulsen on Twitter. I feel like I could talk to you, Grant, because you're just such a great guy in the field of sports for 3 hours about sports. But I mean, we just don't have the time. It's about all the time we have for this one. So Grant, before we let you go, it's an honor and a pleasure to get you on, sir. It was really great chatting with you about your story and some sports as well. And we really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure. I appreciate you guys very much. Keep up the good work, and hopefully our squads keep winning for all the fans out there, reward them for their passion and their energy.
For our sponsors, Regroup Building Services, PM Plus Reserves, Shenandoah Primitives, and our brand new sponsor, Dr. Dave Leadership Corporation. This has been another Kirby on Sports podcast exclusive. Until the next time you see us, always remember to create greatness. So long and peace out.